Chapter 9. Fractured Alliance. The archive was still cold the next day. Rose came straight after breakfast, before the first lesson. There were shadows under her eyes, but her movements were as precise as ever. The dress from the night before was already hanging in her wardrobe. The uniform was back in place, as if the ball had been nothing but an anomaly in the system. On the table sat the 1976 box, closed but with the wax cut through. Beside it lay several neat stacks of papers she and Victor had skimmed the previous afternoon. Polaroids, Julian's letters, notes with the names carved out. She stood over them for a moment before gathering everything into her arms. Files, notebooks, photographs, a bundle of evidence that might change the school's history or only her own life. Voices overlapped in her head. Even so, her fingers tightened around the pages. She put the box back on the shelf, picked up the pile of documents, and headed for the door. Victor stepped through it at that exact moment. They collided visually like two lines on a graph that had not been meant to intersect. "Where are you taking that?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. All it took was to note the direction, not towards the shelves, but towards the corridor leading out. "Where it should have gone in the first place," she said, "to someone with the power to do something about it." She pressed the files tighter to her chest. Victor shut the door behind him and turned the key. The lock's click sounded louder than it should have. "No," he said calmly. "Not today, and not like this." Rose lifted her chin. "You can't stop me." "I can try," he replied, "and you're sensible enough to listen to an argument before you do something irreversible." She walked back to the table, but did not put the papers down. "What's more irreversible than what they've already done?" she asked. "Names cut out, threats, letters, people vanished from the records. Is this meant to sit here for another 18 years until it falls apart?" Victor drew a breath, like someone counting to 10. "Rose," he said quietly, "you're not the only person whose future depends on how the school handles a scandal." "Your future too?" she shot back. He smiled briefly, without humor. "Mine especially." That especially stopped her. "What do you mean?" she asked. He came closer. This time he leaned on the table, not like an archivist, but like someone about to receive a verdict. "Did you think it was a coincidence I work down here?" he asked. "That I just happened by magic to get the keys to St. Oswald's deepest cellars?" "You said your father worked here," she reminded him. "My father did work here," he said, "for peanuts, and to pay off a debt owed to the Whitbys." She froze. "What?" He sighed. "When my father finished here, he had nowhere to go," Victor said. "No money for university, no name on a Cavendish Hall plaque. What he did have was a debt of gratitude to Arthur Whitby, who found him a position here as an archive assistant." His mouth twisted. "You know what those gifts looked like." Rose's eyes flicked involuntarily to the 1976 box. "Arthur?" she began. "Yes," he said, "that Arthur. My father worked here for years, did whatever was asked, including," he nodded towards the cutout names, "helping to tidy the documentation." He broke off. And when they decided he'd been sensible long enough, they informed him the debt didn't disappear. It transferred. "To you," Rose whispered. "To me," he said. "The scholarship I'm on didn't fall from the sky. It's stamped with the Whitby Foundation's crest. Every mark I get, every very good Ashby, is a small repayment to them." He sat down as if his legs had suddenly given out. "If you go to the head with all this," he went on. "If you go to the head with all this," he went on, nodding at the documents, "the first thing they do won't be to study the letters. The first thing they do will be to ask who had access. And the file will say, Victor Ashby was given access to the archives under a scholarship funded by the Whitby family." He met her eyes. "Before anyone starts talking about Arthur, about Julian, about 1976, the questions will be whether Ashby has abused his patron's trust." Rose felt the cold seep into her, though the room's temperature had not changed. "You don't owe them loyalty," she said quickly. "Not the Whitbys. You could testify. Say they used you, that your father—" "Rose," he interrupted gently but firmly, "you're not talking about a human rights tribunal. You're talking about St. Oswald's, a place where any breach of trust means, at the very least, expulsion. And I have nowhere else to go. No one else." The last sentence came out softer. "You have a mother who," he waved a hand, "is what she is, but she exists. You have a brain other universities will pay for if they have to. I have a grant with Whitby on it, and a father still paying off a debt he never had a say in." For a moment, there was only the hum of the building. "You think I want this to go on?" he asked. "The razors, the missing names, the letters that end halfway down the page? I don't. But if you walk into the head's office today with what you've got, the only immediate consequences will be for two people, you and me. The Whitbys will have time to prepare. The school will sweep it away like it always does." Rose's grip on the documents tightened. "So what do you suggest?" she asked. "That I keep quiet because your family owes them?" "I suggest," he said, "you don't charge ahead alone with a bundle of material that's incomplete and easy to discredit. That you don't turn yourself into one more blank on a page. And I suggest you consider that Matt isn't the only one with something to lose." "Is that a threat?" She raised an eyebrow. "It's information," he replied. "The same kind you handed me when you opened the box." He nudged one of the files towards her. "If you want to go to the head, I won't physically drag you back," he added. "It's your choice, but do it knowing the first name to fall won't be Whitby. It'll be Ashby, and right after that, Hartley." They looked at one another. There was no plea for sacrifice in his gaze, just brutal, honest arithmetic. Victor didn't pretend he wasn't trying to protect himself, but he didn't pretend he didn't care about her either. Something shifted in her. Until now, the equation had been simple, her versus the system, with Matt as the opposing face. Now Ashby slid into the formula, bringing with it the knowledge that every move had not only a moral vector, but a very specific personal cost. Slowly, she set the pile of papers back on the table. "All right," she said quietly. "Not today." She didn't add, "but one day." She didn't need to. They both knew this was a stay of execution, not a pardon. Victor nodded like someone who had just been granted a few extra minutes, not victory. "Then we do it properly," he said. "We start by understanding everything we can, find where the other traces are. Then we decide who we trust enough to survive it. To survive it, not to win." Rose looked at the box, the Polaroids, the letters, the torn paper edges. For the first time, she fully grasped that Matt Whitby was not the only one with reason to silence her. The system that fed on debts like Victor's didn't care for people who opened boxes meant to stay shut. When she left the archive, the corridor ran in two directions, up to the offices and down to the rest of the basement. For a moment she stood still, feeling a part of her tug towards the head's door again, like an animal returning to a trap to check the spring. Instead, she turned right, towards the stairs. Each step sounded louder than it should have.
Victor isn't an ally, she thought. He is a mirror. He shows me what it will cost other people.
Up to now, she had treated him instinctively as someone on her side, someone who also saw. Now she saw clearly. He did see, but he counted. His equation had different variables. Ashby in the denominator, Whitby in the numerator, herself somewhere in between.
At the entrance to the girls' wing, she ran into Caroline. Her friend was leaning against the doorframe, talking to two other girls about the ball. The word Whitby flickered in the air like a spark. "Rose," Caroline called when she spotted her. "I've been waiting for you." She turned to the others. "Sorry, we'll finish this later."
The other girls rolled their eyes in good-natured resignation and drifted off. Caroline took a couple of steps towards her.
"Well," she said without preamble, "what was that yesterday? Dancing with the monster in tails?" She swept a hand in mock drama. "Half the hall saw him drag you into the middle and then vanish, leaving you like some tragic heroine."
Rose adjusted the strap of her bag.
"It was just a dance," she said, "and a conversation."
"Looked more like an interrogation." Caroline narrowed her eyes. "And don't tell me you talked about Horace."
The tension in Rose's throat tightened. Julian's lines, Matt's stare, the bruising grip at her waist, it all came back. It wasn't something that could be condensed into a sentence at the dormitory door.
"Not now," she said. "I'll be late for—" She faltered. She wasn't even sure what she would be late for. "I need to check something in the library."
Caroline pulled a face. "The library after the ball?" she groaned. "Rose, I love your consistency, but the world will not collapse if you don't feed it for one day." "This one might," she muttered. Aloud, she said, "We'll talk later, I promise." Caroline studied her. Normally she could tell when Rose was lying. Now she saw something different in her eyes from the usual "I have to study."
"This is about the archive, isn't it?" she asked quietly. "About your mausoleum?"
Guilt stung. Caroline was the only person who gave her pockets of normality, clumsy midnight dancing, jokes about dresses as armor, and yet instinctively Rose was steering her away from the story.
"Caroline," she began, "if I say it's for your own good, will you hate me?"
"That depends," Caroline said, rare seriousness in her voice. "Is it really for my good or for yours?" The question hung between them like a rope. "For both," Rose said at last. "For now, at least." Caroline sighed loudly. "I hate it when you sound like a teacher," she muttered. "Fine, you have," she checked her watch, 48 hours. Then I'm coming for a report, with footnotes."
"All right," Rose said.
They passed each other in the corridor. Caroline trudged back towards the girls' wing. Rose headed for the library, almost empty that morning. A few pupils sat at tables, cramming last minute for tests. Miss Mason, the senior librarian, was loading books onto a trolley, murmuring shelf numbers under her breath. The smell of paper and dust here was different from the archives, lighter, less burdened. Rose chose a table in the far corner between the classics shelf and a window over the courtyard. She set down her notebook, her pad, but took out no books. She leaned her elbows on the desk and laced her fingers. For the first time in a long while, she felt genuinely alone. No witnesses.
Victor had turned out to be someone who had to count his losses. Caroline, someone who had to be shielded. The system wouldn't hesitate to use her. Matt, a threat with his own calculus. She was alone with what she knew.
Witness, not ally, she thought of Victor. Friend, not confidant, of Caroline. Opponent who's also a victim of Matt.
Miss Mason passed with the trolley, nodding.
"Back with us already, Miss Hartley," she said kindly. "The ball did not change your habits?"
"Quite the opposite," Rose said. "It confirmed them."
When the librarian moved away, Rose opened her notebook at a blank page. At the top, she wrote,
1976, what we actually know.
Beneath that, she began listing facts, not conclusions, things she had seen with her own eyes, dates, quotes from the letters, initials, Polaroids, Victor's scraps of information, remarks from Matt's father, each piece on its own.
If she was stuck with the knowledge, she could at least try to sort the chaos. The library was the only place where turning ghosts into equations felt remotely possible. In the margin next to A, she added a small note.
Arthur Whitby, Matt's uncle. Name in brass, handwriting on threats. Died of a heart attack a few years ago.
Next to J, Julian. No surname. No plaque. The summary was simple. Some disappeared from paper. Others ended up in metal.
She leaned back, staring at the lines. Victor could count his losses. Caroline could fight for normality. Matt could defend the family name. None of that changed one thing. Someone here had once died, literally or socially, so the system could go on pretending it was clean.
And whether she had allies or only witnesses, she was already standing on the side that could no longer unsee it. She was halfway down the list when a shadow fell across the page.
Instinctively, she moved her hand to keep the light, then looked up.
Matt stood on the other side of the table, a book under his arm and a mug in his hand. One of the refectory's thick school mugs, only the liquid inside was darker than tea ought to be.
"Library after the ball," he said under his breath. "I'm starting to suspect you may not actually be human."
She was too tired for sarcasm.
"The human one is whoever brought a drink in here," she said, nodding towards the mug. "Miss Mason will be thrilled."
"Miss Mason has seen worse," he muttered, setting it down. "Anyway," he leaned in slightly, "if anyone needs tea today, it's you." He didn't ask to sit. He just sat. Rose eyed the mug. "No beverages allowed in the library," she said.
"Today you do," he replied. "Relax, I'm not trying to poison you. That would be far too unimaginative."
The smell that rose when she lifted the mug was tea laced with something stronger. She recognized it instantly, not from experience, but from reports and corridor gossip. "Is this meant to make me forget?" she asked.
"It's meant to get you to stop looking like you're trying to hold the entire building up with sheer willpower," he said. "If it also loosens your tongue, that'll be a bonus."
She didn't push the mug away. She took a small sip. The liquid burned and spread warmth down her throat into her stomach.
For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were pages turning at nearby tables and Miss Mason's quiet footsteps. "My uncle was a monster, Rose," Matt said at last. He stated it so evenly it could have been a line from a textbook. Rose put the mug down.
"Most people don't talk about their family like that,"
she said. Most people haven't read letters that were supposed to be burnt, he replied. But since you have, we might as well stop pretending we're talking about anyone other than Arthur Whitby.
He glanced at her notebook, saw the initials, the dates, the tight notes.
J, he said. Julian. My father never used his name, but he slipped once. His smile was thin. He was one of those who didn't quite fit the school the way they should.
What does the way they should mean? She asked.
Without questions, he said. Without doubts. Without letters. He rested his elbows on the table.
Arthur was exactly what St. Oswald's adores, he went on. Born winner. He drank, fought, broke rules, but always in ways that could be spun as boyish high spirits of a future benefactor. His eyes flicked to the cluster of names in her notes. When someone needed silencing, he didn't even have to get his hands dirty. There were plenty of people eager to do it for him.
Rose thought of the threat signed A, of the razor. You know what's worst? He asked, not really waiting. He never thought he was a monster. He saw himself as a guardian, someone protecting tradition. How do you know? She asked.
Because my father spent his life repeating the same lines, Matt said. Only by then they sounded less convincing, like a copy of a copy. He traced the table's edge with a finger.
The school loved him, he added. Arthur, not because he was good, because he was useful. Money, name, the perfect example of how a real man deals with problems. He looked at her. You're not going to beat a ghost, Rose. The words landed heavier than any line of Horace.
It's not a ghost, she said. It's facts, letters, photos, people who have no plaques, he cut in, whose names have been cut out. You know what St. Oswald's keeps of them? Nothing. Of Arthur, Hall, Fund, Library Wing, an award for citizenship.
Rose's hand tightened around her pen.
That doesn't mean I'm supposed to stay quiet, she said. It just means it'll be harder.
It means, he said, steady, if you're thinking of taking this to people who live off my family's money, you need to understand he's still a hero to them. And you, he hesitated, you're the girl who once filed an alcohol report and might be about to take their grant. He leaned back.
I'm not saying this to scare you, he added. Fear you do just fine on your own. I'm just telling you what the board looks like. She studied him. Why? She asked. Yesterday on the dance floor, you sounded like you wanted me to fall flat on my face.
For a flicker of a moment, something shifted in his features.
Because yesterday was the first time I heard words he would have hated, he said, out loud, not on a page. He nodded at her notes. They say tradition demands sacrifices, he quoted. Arthur always liked that half. He never cared for the other.
What other? She asked.
That we always sacrifice the same people, he said, the ones whose names are easy to cut out.
Silence settled in. What do you want to do, Hartley? He asked at last. Actually?
Not with the archive or with the letters. What do you want to do?
It wrong-footed her more than any threat.
I want them to stop pretending nothing happened, she said after a moment. To stop putting your uncle on honor lists like someone who never hurt anyone.
And specifically, he pressed, you want the plaques taken down, the curriculum rewritten, a revolution in black tie?
I want it written down, she said. Somewhere they can't cut it away with a razor. He gave a bleak little smile.
So you do believe in paper, he said.
optimist.
"And you believe in what?" she asked. "Silence?"
Survival, he said, in the idea that sometimes it's better to be a coward who can still move pieces than a hero who ends up as a footnote in someone else's scandal.
It sounded too much like Victor to be coincidence.
"Victor says the same," she noted.
"Victor has his reasons," Matt said. "His father signed off on things everyone now pretends never happened. Your motives are different, so are mine." He flattened his hands on the table as if to push himself up. "My uncle was a monster," he repeated, "but the school loved him. Men like that don't leave these walls after a decade. They linger for generations." He nodded towards the line of plaques above the entrance. "You don't beat ghosts with a handful of yellowing letters."
"Maybe not," she said, "but ghosts don't like the light."
It wasn't a rallying cry, more a reminder to herself. Matt's smile this time was brief, uncertain whether it was naivety or courage.
"We'll see," he said. "Just make sure when you flip the switch there's no one standing under the lamp."
He got up, picked up the mug, empty now, though she hadn't seen him drink, and the book he'd never opened.
As he turned away, he paused.
"And if you ever do decide to act on this," he said, still facing the shelves, "make sure you're not the only one who knows every detail. Ghosts like to hunt alone targets."
He walked off between the stacks like someone who knew every shortcut. Rose watched him go, knowing what they'd just done was neither reconciliation nor alliance. More like a ceasefire. With one awkward truth between them, they both lived in the shadow of the same monster, and that maybe the only way not to be killed by ghosts was to stop pretending they weren't there.